following is an Operation Podcast production.
Are you ready for a wild ride? I'm Alexis Artin, and I invite you to strap in because this is more than a podcast. This is Look at Me Now.
But the real story is I'm a recovering meth addict, drug addict, eating disorder, just train wreck of a human being trying to figure out how to human. And then I pivoted midlife and became a therapist. So you can have non-consensual orgasms while you're being sexually assaulted. Yeah. I've never talked about that on a podcast before.
What am I missing here? Doesn't everybody know what's happening? It made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality.
Can we talk about cult life for a second?
We sure can. I'm all about it. Okay, here we go.
Because with micro yeses, you don't have to wait until, I'm going to wait till Monday. I'm going to eat all the, quote, bad food. There's no bad food. But I'm going to eat all my bad food and then I'll start. I'm going to wait until Monday morning and then I'll start the workout routine or making the sales calls or whatever. But that's not how brains brain. Our brains hate, like, all changes, even good ones, will register to your brain as threatening.
How do you correlate getting unstuck from all of that?
I love that question so much. Freedom and flexibility and choices, that is to me the ideal. That is the biggest flex, is to have the ability to make choices.
Okay, everybody, strap in. I mean, fucking strap in. We've got Britt Frank here today, and I'm recovering from our conversation because it was so fantastical. We are talking about the real stuff. We are talking about trauma. We are talking about how to get unstuck. We are talking about micro yeses. We are talking about how to actually get from a place of being at rock bottom and climbing to the mountaintop, and doing it in a way that is so authentic and so realistic and so inspirational yet achievable. Don't miss this episode. Don't miss it. Hey, y'all, I'm so excited to announce my partnership with Timeline Nutrition. As you know, I am a cancer survivor and I am always looking for any edge for longevity and wellness. And this Swiss life science company has spent 10 years in research and development, infusing their products with urolithin A, which is a mitochondrial function improver. Their MitoPure is my favorite of their products, but every one of their products is infused with this magical urolithin A, which improves cellular energy, muscle strength, endurance, decreases inflammation, and ultimately removes the damage in your mitochondrial cells. This is magic in a box. Please go to www.timelinenutrition.com/LAMN10 to get your discount on these life-saving, life-changing products. Holy smokes. I feel like I say that every time I open. I go, holy smokes. And I think I do that because I'm just, like, my inner child is so excited. I mean, we've already been chatting offline here, and I'm like, oh my God, we should be recording this because it's all so good. But anyway, welcome, y'all. Welcome back to Look at Me Now. I'm here with my guest, Britt Frank. And what is so freaking fantastic to me is that several years ago, I did a webinar that, like, led into, like, a sales funnel with some sort of, like, online course, right? But the title of that, or at least the subtitle of it, was The 7 Sneakiest Ways We Stay Stuck. And it was all about the ways that we self-sabotage and whatnot. And I was pretty tickled pink about it at the time. Come to find that my brain twin has come out with a whole book that's way better than what I did. And I'm so excited to have her here. This is Britt Frank, everybody. And she's a legend. And because I will go on and on and on and on, I'm actually just going to throw this to her, which I don't normally do, and say, please introduce yourself.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
No pressure.
So I have my very clean, shiny, front-facing intro. Hello, my name is Britt Frank, and I'm a licensed neuropsychotherapist and author of The Science of Stuck. But the real story is I'm a recovering meth addict, drug addict, eating disorder, just train wreck of a human being trying to figure out how to human. And in my recovery journey, I figured out there are some things that if you know them, things don't have to go quite as poorly. And then I pivoted midlife and became a therapist. So that's the real story.
So the real story is that's why I'm like legendary status sitting here, because there is no bullshit. And that is the altar that I pray to, is the no bullshit altar. So thank you immediately for your authenticity. You're my people. And I'm sure that everybody's already intrigued to hear this story. And for longtime listeners, this is season 2, for our longtime listeners of 10, 11 episodes, you know, we know that we start this podcast by looking back. And you've already dropped some pretty big atomic bombs by your introduction of all of the things that you have traversed and been challenged by, dare I say, in your life. So can we look back at the beginnings of that? Can we look back at young Britt, and where are the imprints that took place that created a woman that would later become an addict, that would later face OCD, that would later have to triumph over an eating disorder, and so on and so forth? Can you take us back to the beginnings of that, where the knot started and then threaded through everything else?
So I think with traumatic imprints, one of the hardest things to reckon with is when it doesn't look like anything bad is happening. I think for a lot of people, they can look at their timeline and go, this was objectively bad. This is not me, but for people who have this story, I was beat. I didn't have enough food. We had no place to live. Those things no one's going to argue that those are traumas, and no one is going to push back on, well, obviously, if you went through that, of course, there are going to be some challenges. For me, and I think for a lot of people, it didn't look like trauma while it was happening, which was so fucking confusing when all of a sudden puberty hit and hormones started raging, and I noticed I was making all of these choices and reacting in these very, very dramatic ways, and I had no idea why. I think it was 27 when a therapist said to me, you know, like your upbringing wasn't normal? And it's like, wait, I don't have trauma. This is just what people do. Trauma is that stuff, not this stuff. So I think one of the hardest ways to reconcile a traumatic past is like, you have to call it what it is. Not all trauma is overt, and not all of it feels bad while it's happening.
Can we unpack that a little bit? I find that fascinating because I grew up in a very similar way where, you know, I ended up in my life traversing a ton of difficult things. But most people would look back at my history and go, well, where's the trauma history that would lead to you being in these abusive relationships, accumulating this mass amount of debt, having all this plastic surgery, like being suicidal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, can you unpack for us, even in your specific case, how somebody who has seemingly this wonderful upbringing could label that as trauma?
Well, it helps to define trauma if we're going to...
Let's do it.
And like the word trauma has gotten so buzzy, trendy.
I totally agree with this, yes.
It doesn't actually mean much anymore, which is like, we went from never talking about trauma to, oh, everything is trauma and everyone's a narcissist and everything that triggered it's okay. So let's define it. I'm a trauma therapist. Trauma is anything that overwhelms your brain's processing ability. It's sort of like digestion, but in your brain. So
yes.
Like anything that's too big to process for any reason is going to get stuck in there.
Anything our nervous system doesn't have the capacity for.
Correct. And that's not a strength thing. That's not like I'm strong, so I have more capacity. It's like, I don't know why you can digest cheeseburgers and I can. It's just like, because bodies are weird. Yeah. Like, because brains are weird. So I don't know why my system couldn't tolerate certain things and someone else could. So trauma is anything that exceeds your brain's digestion ability. I don't even use the word trauma anymore. I call it brain indigestion. And I get really pissed off people sliding into my DMs going, you're minimizing people's trauma. I'm like, listen, sexual abuse as a child, rape as an adult, drug addiction. I'm not minimizing people's trauma. I'm just saying calling it brain indigestion lets us locate what it is so then we can make choices for what to do about it. If it's just trauma, if it's just depression, there's no way to nail down a solution. So I'm really big on let's take all the clinical words off the table and just call the shit what it is. It's brain indigestion.
That's really interesting. So it's almost like an attachment to the word trauma as a crutch in some capacity.
Yeah, and a crutch, or just when you say the word trauma, you have this immediate association of war or poverty or genocide.
A box that it goes in.
Exactly. So
Sure.
if I don't fit into this box, it's not for me. One thing that I did not learn until way later is that not all sexual trauma feels traumatic when it's happening. So if you were to ask me as a 20-year-old, oh my God, did anything scary happen to you as a child? I would have said no. It wasn't. Something that a lot of sexual trauma survivors won't talk about is that our bodies are biological. They're wired to respond. And so people will have orgasms, they'll respond favorably because
they experience physical pleasure.
Exactly.
Because it is your body's biological response. It's not necessarily your mental or emotional response. And also when you're a child, you don't have such a wide perspective on what's happening at that time to attach a story to it.
Exactly. But even as adults, you can have non-consensual orgasms while you're being sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
I've never talked about that on a podcast before because it is such a shamey, of all the things that I've done to mess up my life, that's the one that's oh my God, how could I have responded favorably? But that's, again, how bodies do their thing. So it's so...
Right. And also it's peeling back the label of it even being favorable as much as it just being a biological response.
Yes.
It's not, we can't even attach the story of it being favorable as much as it is just biological.
Correct. Which is de-shaming.
Right.
So then you can trace back, why am I making all these wackadoo choices as an adult? Stories and symptoms don't come out of nowhere. No one with a perfect childhood suddenly at 22 is smoking meth out of a light bulb and doing very unspeakable things in order to acquire said meth. It doesn't happen. So all of our symptoms and our stories now are echoes of stories and symptoms from the past. I fought that one for a long time. No, my childhood was perfect.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe another big piece of what you're talking about is us gaslighting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When we say, oh, my childhood wasn't that bad. Right. I had a roof over my head. I had food in my mouth. I had, what I needed when I needed it. Doesn't necessarily account for the full picture of things. And it does get downplayed or dismissed, and we gaslight ourselves.
1,000%. That's why I don't even like this binary of I had a good child or a bad childhood, or I had a traumatic upbringing or a it's our lives are too complex to sort them into these two boxes. So it's not, did you have a good childhood? It's what were the choices that people made that impacted you? And is that impacting you today? And if so, how much? Because even if you had the perfect set of parents, nobody does, growing up is really tough. Becoming a mushy infant to a fully functional-ish adult, that itself is overwhelming and traumatic. Even if nothing, quote, overtly bad happens. Every second of every day of every minute that we live, information's flying at our brains. And sometimes the things that we don't even think should cause indigestion do. And sometimes the things that we think are going to won't. It's weird.
It is weird. And as you're saying that, I'm flashing to when I had actually both my children. I was going to say my first son, but this happened with both of my kids. Trying to give them breast milk, and their bodies could not digest the breast milk. And then we moved on to formula, and their little bodies could not digest the formula. So we had to go to this prescription formula that was basically almost like a pre-digested thing that was missing certain proteins that they couldn't digest. And it was just this newborn little thing that's supposed to just have breast milk, but it wasn't digestible for them. And, thinking about how much more complicated that gets with everything that we're metabolizing emotionally, verbally, energetically, physically, as we grow, it just gets more and more complicated. So I really love that, indigestion analogy, because it does make it in a certain way, less accusational, I would say.
Yes, because what I would say to a client who is struggling with breastfeeding, it's like, we just need to get this child nutrients. How they come doesn't matter. And I'm not a parent, but how many parents, and I'm sure you can relate, are just spinning in, but I want to be able to XYZ. My choice is to do this and I can't. What's wrong with me? It's like, there's nothing wrong with you as a parent. I don't know why your baby's digestive system needed that. But the point is, let's get it what it needs, not let's blame you for things outside your control. And trauma is largely the same. A lot of people have this sort of biological loyalty to their family. It's like, we don't need to deal in blame and shame and hating your parents. It's more like, what was the impact of life on your little digestive system? Not, did you have a good parent or a bad parent? Because that's not always helpful.
Yeah, and I love even making the analogy of somebody that feels like a boy in girl's skin or a girl in boy's skin, and they're growing up in an environment that maybe has some religious implications to say that's not okay, right? And what is digestible and not to that person's nervous system, and how much are they, suffering, trying to squeeze themselves into being someone that isn't a fit for their truth.
Exactly. And the indigestion model for all of these things helps with the for years, I was so convinced I am crazy. I have severe and having a mental illness doesn't make someone crazy. There's actually no such thing as crazy. That is a judgment, not a biological reality. But I really thought I was crazy. It's sort of like if you got food poisoning and you did not know that if you eat contaminated fish, you're going to be spewing things from every possible orifice. That's what happens. If you don't know that your brain does brain things when you start acting out with addiction and bad relationships and weird symptoms and intrusive thoughts, that's the equivalent of puking and pooping after getting salmonella.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the times, there's been many, that I've felt this, I'm using this with like kitten gloves here, the word crazy, but is... One, I went through panic disorder, and this happened when I was in my, I want to say like early 20s, when I first experienced my first panic attack. And I was certain that I was going to die. And the other option that was rushing and coursing through my veins was, well, if I don't die, I'm going to end up going crazy. Yes. And I won't be able to come back from it.
Yeah.
And the scariest part of a panic attack or having panic disorder for me wasn't even the attack itself as much as the waiting between attacks of when is it going to happen again? And now the next time it happens, what if I can't come out of it? Mm-hmm. And walking around with a down comforter over me, going into restaurants and things with, my parents, God bless, being like, this is our 20-something-year-old daughter, like who can't, leave the house. And if she does, she has to have a down comforter wrapped around her. Thank God again for wonderful therapists and for medication and all of those things. But it is one of those things where that can get a chokehold on you. Mm-hmm. This idea of, feeling crazy and gaslighting yourself and going into a spiral around that. Another time was, I was working at a company that was very much like a cult, and I was at the red hot center of it, and I caught on really quickly, but it took me a long time to get out. And I remember when I finally did get out, seeing all of my friends stay. Mm. And I was like, what am I missing here? Doesn't everybody know what's happening? Doesn't everybody see so clearly? And I feel like they do see, and they're still saying, and it made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality.
Can we talk about cult life for a second?
We sure can. I'm all about it. Okay, here we go. Let's get down this rabbit hole.
Let's talk cults. Because it's so important to know not all cults are sex cults or murder cults. Like, those are the ones that we see on Netflix. The business cults are getting a little bit more press, but there are so many types of cults running around. An abusive relationship is also a cult. I think Amanda Montell, she wrote Cultish, said an abusive relationship is a cult of one.
I love that book.
I love that book
I love that
much.
book. Everybody get that book, Cultish. Oh, God. So good.
Because I've been in an abusive relationship and a religious cult and in a businessy adjacent cult and the cult of fitness and the cult of wellness.
It's everywhere, as this book will outline.
Exactly. But what people don't realize is that you get sucked in, not you, me, I got sucked into a cult, and so do many people, because it's so nice not to have to build your own personality. It's like, here's the rules. We will tell you what to think, where, eat, listen to, watch, and if you do all of these things,
you belong.
You belong. Exactly. Oh my God, sign me up. I'm like, here's my vein. Shoot me up with this cult stuff. I am in.
Yes.
It makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is so buried in language, as that book really clearly identifies and lays out. And it's all of the really the love bombing and the sense of belonging, which just floods our nervous system. And you can even speak to all the neurological chemicals that we get from that sense of belonging and that sense of community and that sense of you meet somebody and 2 seconds later they're telling you how much they love you and they'll do anything for you. And oh my gosh, I found my people. I found my group. I found where I belong. Mm-hmm. And it just floods you with all of the yumminess.
So, I mean, really, I've done meth and I've done abusive relationships and I've done cults. And when it's good, there's a reason that stuff is hard to kick. It's like, well, I would never do that. I remember being so, self-righteous in my teens. Like, I would never do those drugs. This was like the dare.
Sure.
Like, you don't do drugs. Dare to stay off drugs. Right. And then here I am in a broken light bulb with a straw doing meth, because before it sucks, it's amazing.
Right.
And we probably should teach that to kids, because it's true.
And not only that, but it's also this. Even just, I'm giving like a sort of like more bland example, but I'm gonna drink that drink at this high school party, not because I want to drink, but because I'm afraid if I don't, I will be the outcast. It's these really sneaky little things, and it's why I, in high school was a drug addict and shoplifting and making fake IDs and doing all of these things, was because there was a fear in me that if I didn't, I was going to upend the relationships that I had. And the wiring in me was, I've got to do whatever I can to belong and to stay safe and to be loved and valued and liked in my environment.
Which is why the question, like, why, especially for women who stay in abusive relationships, that why don't they leave? Or what? It's like, maybe we should look at, there are things happening within the context of every addiction, every abuse, even and I had panic disorder too, and it's awful. And I have such issues with how the clinical world labels it. It's like, if you brought your car into the mechanic because the check engine light came on, they're not going to diagnose you with check engine light disorder. But when we have panic, we get diagnosed with panic disorder. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me anymore, but I digress. But, all of these things make sense. It's not what's wrong with them. It's what's right about this. What is happening within this thing, whatever the thing is, whether it's procrastination or staying up till 3 a.m. scrolling on TikTok. It doesn't have to be like DEFCON 5 stuff. But all of it makes sense in context, because there's no such thing as crazy. This is like the thing I'll rant about forever. Having a mental illness doesn't make you crazy. I take psych meds. I go to therapy. It's not because I'm crazy. It's because brain. Crazy is not a thing.
I love that. So can you then, I feel like this is a good time to walk through the transition of how you got from having that straw in that light bulb to being the woman that's sitting here on the couch with me now. Like, what was, I think they say there's that famous phrase of, it doesn't take 20 years to change. It takes a moment of inspiration or a moment of desperation. I don't know if that's true for you, but is there a moment that you recall? I don't know if it's you hit rock bottom or, you had a near-death experience or something, but something obviously shifted, and maybe it was death by 1,000 paper cuts of that lifestyle, or if there was one, defining moment. But can you unpack that for us?
Yeah. And I love the story that people have of, my life was bad. I saw the burning bush. The voice came out of the sky, and then my life wasn't bad anymore. I don't have that story. And I don't really actually know anybody who who does? I've heard it. It's like an urban myth. But mine was, let's try a thing and go back. Let's maybe take a few steps forward and then go 6 miles back and 8 miles off course, and sort of this vortex of meandering. So there wasn't a defining moment. But the last time I ever smoked meth, if there was going to be a rock bottom moment, I guess that would be it. My justification for my drug use was, it doesn't really count as an addiction if there's people around me. It's sort of like calories don't count if it's a party.
Got it. Like I'm only an alcoholic if I drink alone.
Exactly.
Got it.
That was my little brain's story.
Right.
But like this time it was 5 a.m. Everyone was gone. And I'm sitting all by myself in this disgusting, filthy, grimy bathroom with a meth pipe in my hands. And so, and I would love to say, and I saw the error of my ways and I threw it down, and it's like, no, I took the hit. I got very, very, very tweaky high. But as soon as I took the hit, I think in the split second between when I did it and when it landed in my brain, it was sort of like all the little voices in my head gathered around a conference table, and they're like, girl, this is a problem. Like, this is your problem. No one's to blame. No one's coming to save you. Like, this is you. What are you going to do? And then I got really tweaky high, but that was the last time I ever smoked meth.
Okay. And so you come out of that high, and what in, the awakening of recovering back to, not being high, being more grounded, being in your body, having that awareness, even if it was a microsecond, that convening of the powers that be inside of you, what happens?
I love this story because it's so not sexy. Like, again, I really love here's my really dramatic turnarounds and the music starts. And
I think that's a problem.
Yes.
That people think it needs to be sexy, and so they don't do the work.
Exactly.
And so I love that we're going to just get really nitpicky here and say, no, this is how it happens. This is how the change and the transformation begins.
Right, because no one's going to do a reel about what happens in those first few days post, I'm done doing the bad thing, now what do I do? So eventually I got out of the bathroom and I made my way home. And I was, if you've ever done speed, it feels good and then it feels incredibly terrifying, and you're paranoid and you're seeing things and you're hearing things. And so I'm like in the fetal position, shaking, and I made a call to a sponsor type person. And I'm like, I have an addiction and I have trauma and I surrender, and I'm just going on. And she's like, Britt, when was the last time you ate food? And I was like, oh, wait, food. It had been days. And this poor woman, she's like, or bless her heart, she said, all right, can you go, and keep in mind I was tweaking, so I had no actual logical parts of my brain available. She's like, can you go over to your refrigerator? And I'm like, I think so, yeah. And then she's like, can you open it? Okay. There was one single Yoplait blueberry yogurt in there and a whole bunch of weird stuff, moldy stuff, and a lot of soda. And I took it out, and this woman sat on the phone with me for an hour, spoon by spoon, eating that goddamn yogurt.
This is how it happens, people.
That's how it happens. And I call these micro yeses. She was actually teaching the stuff that I now talk about in my work. It's because you were talking about those microseconds. Micro yeses are not anything worth sharing publicly, but those tiny little yeses that you can do even when you're tweaking, even when you're drunk, even when you're depressed, even when you're panicking. Micro yeses allow you to maneuver through the storm that's happening in your brain.
Well, it's sort of like when you're knitting, right? Not that I knit, but I'd like to knit one day. But it's the little stitches are what make the big blanket.
Right.
It's the micro stitching.
Right.
It's the patience, if you will, and it's the conscious, mindful choice and skill and whatever else to just stay committed to the process of one stitch at a time, and eventually you've woven this big, fantastical, whatever, scarf or blanket or what have you, trench coat, the Technicolor dream coat. But you really like these micro yeses are how it is done. And I actually think I don't want to see the big wow splashy transformation, because that doesn't do anything for me, but honestly make me feel like I'm comparing and failing for most people, right? I mean, not necessarily me, because I think I can see the bigger picture most of the time, not to say that I don't get triggered, but I think that people do need to see these micro yeses more than anything else, and they're not out there. And so I really appreciate that you're saying it was one fucking spoon of blueberry yogurt at a time. That's how I got out of it.
Yoplait, if you're listening, you should sponsor me.
Serious.
Just saying.
Serious. And the blueberry flavor specifically.
Let's
get
blueberry.
Specific here.
Right, because with micro yeses, you don't have to wait until, I'm going to wait till Monday. I'm going to eat all the, quote, bad food. There's no bad food. But I'm going to eat all my bad food and then I'll start. I'm going to wait until Monday morning and then I'll start the workout routine or making the sales calls or whatever. But that's not how brains brain. Our brains hate, like, and I learned this in my training, which was so helpful, that all changes, even good ones, will register to your brain as threatening. And it'll get indigestion with good choices, which is why why can't I just take 5 minutes to walk around my neighborhood? Or why can't I just meditate for 10 minutes? Because that's too big for your brain to digest. It shouldn't be, is what I hear. But like what I think my brain should digest and what it will are two separate things. So it's like micro yeses allow you to kind of like mush the food and feed it into your system so you can tolerate it. So then you can build capacity, which then builds resilience, which then creates motivation. Motivation doesn't happen before. Motivation happens after you start the thing, not before it. That was also helpful to know.
Right. And I've also heard you say in the past, which, because you just brought up the word motivation, and I think this is something really important to highlight for people, is that motivation is always there. It's just, where are you motivated to? Can you just speak on that for a second?
Yeah, it kind of like nails on chalkboard when I hear people talk about, I'm just so unmotivated. It's like, you're never not motivated. If your heart is beating and like there is breath in your lungs and you are alive, that means your brain is motivated. The question is not, are you feeling motivated or not? It's, what are you motivated by? Are you motivated by safety, which is sort of your brain's default? Stay small, stay safe, don't rock the boat, don't get eaten by a tiger. Like brains don't care about success. Brains care about don't die.
Right.
So like your brain is either going to be motivated to survive or it's going to be motivated to choose. And so you're never not motivated. When you're laying on, I'm not saying it's good to do nothing. I am saying when you're laying on the couch doing nothing, it's not because you're unmotivated. It could be that legitimately you're tired and burnt out and your brain is motivated to recover. Or it could be you're motivated by fear of taking a risk. Or it could be you're motivated by something else. But we're never unmotivated.
Yeah, I think it speaks to, if anybody here has heard the term monkey mind, right? It's sort of the amygdala in our brain it's like a primal animal, and it is looking for, anything that is a threat.
Right.
And it is looking for safety and satiation for its basic needs. And then we have, our prefrontal cortex, which is more of our executive center, that can do the higher functioning things, like to bring love to those choices, to remind us that we're not about to be eaten by a tiger, to remind us that we are always motivated, and it's not just towards, I don't have any motivation if I don't want to get up off the couch and do this thing, but it doesn't mean that I'm not motivated. I'm just motivated towards something else. And if I can just bring my more elevated awareness to that, then I feel like I have more choice around it. And I think that that's something really important for people to understand and catch in terms of what you're saying and how it works. I am curious, because your work is so high level, but you are able to say it in such a digestible way of calling it stuck, which was what I was doing way back in the day when I was using the word stuck, not as comprehensively as you are by any means. But it is stuck is a word that sticks, and it's a word that we understand, right? And so if I was going to double click on the word stuck with you right now, and looking at the transition from the childhood that you had to inevitably all of the dis-ease and the choices that you were making to compensate for that childhood, the best way that you knew how at the time, through the drugs and through the eating disorder and all of these other things, through the trauma experiences that you've had. How do you correlate getting unstuck from all of that?
I love that question so much. I also love the word stuck so much because, like you said, why life's hard. Why do we have to slap big multi-syllabic words on the things? Like, I think that's bullshit. It's like, let's call the things what they are so then we can change them, right?
Totally.
Not everyone identifies as having a mental illness or a trauma or whatever, but show me someone who says they've never been stuck and I'll show you a liar.
Right.
Everyone knows what it's like to feel stuck.
Preach. Yes,
right?
yes.
So again, to define it, I do not define stuck as situations where you're oppressed, abused, or have no choices. Like, stuck assumes that you have choices and you have some degree of agency and capacity.
Absolutely.
If not, that is not the situation to which any of my work refers. Like, genocide is not stuck. That's genocide, you know? Like,
Understood.
An abused child is not stuck. They are being abused. For me as an adult in abusive situations, even though it wasn't my fault, I did not cause it, I did not ask for it, but I was making choices that contributed to that relationship, that series of relationships making sense. Stuck automatically assumes you have choices. So to get from stuck to unstuck, you start making choices. And again, micro yeses get the job done because stuck becomes unstuck the second you take any action in any direction, even a bad direction, at any size. So micro yeses actually work with your brain's neurology to get you from stuck to unstuck a lot faster than trying to take the big giant bites and getting brain indigestion.
And so that can correlate to, let's walk this path for a second, not just I'm stuck in an action habit, right? Of staying on the couch instead of working out, of eating the, processed foods versus the whole foods, whatever. But it's also, track me here and see if I'm getting this right from your perspective, that emotionally, behaviorally, our thought patterns and our beliefs, there's micro yeses to shifting those as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So it's not just, I'm stuck as an adult with these, lazy versus active habits, but it's also, oh, wow, I've been gaslighting myself and telling myself that I should carry shame because I experienced pleasure during an assault, as an example. Or, these things happened to me as a child or whatever. That there are micro yeses involved in so it is mental, it is emotional, it is physical, it is all of these things that you use this approach for.
Exactly. And even I'll use and I'm not minimizing this experience for people who have it, it's terrifying, but Sunday scaries are a pretty common thing that a lot of people have, right? We've been grinding at 90 miles an hour all week. It takes all weekend to come down. And then Sunday night, all of a sudden, it's the panic and the revenge bedtime procrastination. And what is this? Sunday scaries are not a problem with you. It's your brain responding to the demands of your week. It's sort of like driving a car. If you don't know that cars need gas, and if you have a stick shift, you have to shift, then you're going to think, I'm the problem. It's me. And it's like, Sunday scaries make a whole lot of sense if you understand what's going on in your body. But if you tell yourself, I'm stuck with the Sunday scaries, that story of I'm stuck, I have no choices is going to amp up the brain physiology that's going to make you feel even more stuck. So sometimes your micro yeses are just the thought of, my brain's on my side. I don't like it when my amygdala goes into lion mode unnecessarily, but it's not trying to hurt. Even the term amygdala hijack, which everyone uses, it's like your brain's not a terrorist. Your brain's on your side always.
Yeah.
So even just making a choice to start with my brain's on my side. Like I have fuck idea what's going on or what I need or how I feel, but I'm going to start with my brain is on my side. Sometimes that micro yes thought can pivot enough that you can make better choices.
Well, then walk us from your choice to spoon feed yourself.
Literally.
Baby steps out, right? Like you're crawling out of that tunnel of darkness and finding the light. And then what happens? What's the trajectory from that yogurt moment
From yogurt
until
to
now.
here. Yeah. Like the thing with micro yeses, and everyone fights back with the same argument. How am I supposed to get anywhere I want in life if I'm taking steps that are microscopic? The kind of glib answer is, well, a lot faster than if you keep doing the things that you're doing and taking too big of a bite and then getting stuck. My jam. But like micro yes it's sort of like having invested money that compounds. Like micro yeses don't just stay there, they compound and then they add up and they build this internal reservoir of yes I can, yes I did, which then gives you dopamine. So micro yeses allow you to take bigger steps and to go further, faster, sustainably. So it wasn't spoon feed yogurt from then till now. It was spoon feed yogurt, take little teeny tiny steps. Then I was able to go to a 12-step meeting. Then I was able to go to therapy. Then I was able to go into treatment. I had the resources and I was fortunate that I could. And then after that, it was, oh, wow, I am learning the stuff about the brain. I'm going to quit my job. Now I'm going to go do this and do that. And you can take bigger steps once you build that internal capacity.
I mean, it just reminds me of my first child. He crawled a lot longer than other kids, to the point where we were about to take him to a therapist for it, an occupational therapist. And all of a sudden, he was running before I knew it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, okay, well, sometimes it is crawl a little longer, or sometimes it is, you crawl and you fall and you crawl a little more and then you walk and then but before you know it, you're running. And once you're running, like, good luck stopping them. Good luck catching them.
Or us. It's the same process, right? Which is why goal setting is great. But for me, goals are more of a set it and then forget it. Because if you focus on your goals, it's too big. And you're going to get discouraged and you're going to shut down. If you told me during like my yogurt time, like, this is where you want to go, I would have said, fuck you, I'm quitting, it's too hard. Yeah. So rather than focusing on the outcome, focus on how do you want this to feel? Like, the choice you're about to make is going to feel either good in the moment and bad long term, or bad in the moment and good long term, and then training your brain to sort of almost gaming the system so you can plan for it.
And what you're saying, even with the micro yeses, is you're setting a micro goal. Yes. Go to the refrigerator.
Yeah.
And you give a micro yes. Set a micro goal. Open the refrigerator.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to open it. Micro yes. Right? So it's like it is this hand-holding process of setting a really reasonable, really doable, really motivating, realistic goal,
like stupid,
that you can
easy.
achieve.
Yeah.
And my coach always calls them 3-foot tosses. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but if I have, I'm going to repeat it. She talks about, she goes on stage during her retreats and she sets up those ring toss games, and she puts one at 3 feet, one at 5 feet, 10 feet, and then like 15 feet or something. And she brings some people up and she gives them a certain amount of rings. And she says, okay, like whoever gets the most points is going to win a prize. And so, people are going for the 15 and they're going for the 10 and they're, whatever, and they're missing and they're whatever. Maybe one of them lands and they're celebrating because they think, oh my God, I'm going to win. Right. And then at the end, she comes up with her rings and she goes, just gently leans over from the line and goes 3, 3, 3, right? And she wins every time. And it's to illustrate that, we always are going for that big flashy, splashy, Instagram worthy thing, right? That TikTok worthy thing of like, look at this massive transition, right? And that's the goal and that's the achievement, right? It's going from, rags to riches, from nobody to worldwide celebrity, versus one toss, one stitch, walk to the refrigerator, right? And by the way, that's how it happens anyway. Even with somebody that goes from, rags to riches, it is a series of events that you aren't seeing happening behind the scenes. So I think that that's a really beautiful calling out, and something that everybody who is listening or watching this can take away is slow down to speed up, is something that a mentor of mine used to say.
I love
slow
that.
Slow down to speed up.
Now there's a little sticky point underneath all of that.
Please.
Which is the unpopular thing no one wants to talk about.
It's sticky. Let's get
Let's get
unstuck.
sticky. Yeah, right.
I love it.
It's if these things are so easy, why are we not all doing them, right? It's not rocket. I was actually kind of pissed off when I'm like, how much money have I spent on therapy, grad school, destroying my life, and you're telling me take small steps? Like, I was kind of like, I hate you. I hate everything.
Right.
But if they're so easy, why do we not do it? It's not because we're lazy or crazy or unmotivated. We've already established that's not a thing.
Or we're just not good enough. It's not meant for us.
Exactly.
Whatever. Right.
All of that is crap. This is the thing that people get angry about. But it's like, if this is not true for you, then don't listen to it. But like, there are benefits to almost every source of stuckness. Like
secondary gain.
Yes.
Secondary gain.
Yes. It wouldn't be there if it wasn't doing a job. And again, I'm not speaking for everyone in a domestically violent situation. I'll speak for me and me only. So don't DM me. What kind of benefit could I have possibly had from staying in such a dangerous situation? And one of the answers that I had to really, really get honest and dig for was this. As long as I was with somebody that was that bad, I didn't have to deal with any of my own shit. I could be good because they were so bad.
Absolutely.
That was so gross. That was like puke, but like the capacity to hold that truth without shaming myself allowed me to break it. So we need to figure out not just why is this behavior bad, but what job is even the most jacked up behavior doing that's incenting you to stay in it. And we have to dig without shame. This is called shadow work.
Yes, and it is. It's the capacity to look at all sides.
Right.
It is the capacity to know that everything in life is equilibrated, and knowing that there is no light without equal shadow, and there is no shadow without equal light. And what comes down, what goes up must come down, equal distance.
Yes.
And for day there's night, and for ebb there's flow. I mean, particle to antiparticle. I say this all the time, but everything in life is completely equilibrated. And if you're expecting to live a one-sided life, you're living in either a fantasy or a nightmare.
Or a cult.
And it's or cults. And none of it is the full truth, right? And are we willing to look at the full truth? I'll never forget one of my all-time greatest mentor, who I actually had on the podcast last season, Dr. John DeMartini. And he's always looking at, well, what's the other side? What are we not seeing? What are we not accounting for?
Yes.
Right? In the accountability process of the balance sheet of getting to homeostasis, of getting to equilibrium, of getting to that place where we are sitting in our truth without judgment of this being too good to be true, or, you know, the worst thing that could possibly be happening to me. Just, these are the facts without any story attached. And this is serving a purpose, that there is a divine order in what's seemingly chaos. And he told a story once about there was a woman who married into a very wealthy family. She was a woman who didn't have a lot, and she was labeled by the family as a gold digger. And they had a son together, her and the wealthy man that she married. And the son at a young age passed away unexpectedly and tragically. And years had passed, and this woman was still massively grieving. And Dr. DeMartini has a grief method that can diffuse, is the word that I will use, the charge that we hold around grief. And it takes 3.5 hours, no more, typically, and the grief is gone, and it's replaced with a sense of presence and unconditional love. And she went in to meet with him to do this process, and she was so resistant. And so he was unpacking, where's the secondary gain here? And he found out that if she actually recovered from her grief, if she allowed herself to be free of the grief, that would untie any secure relationship to the family that was funding her.
Wow.
And he said, so you have a choice. You can remove the grief, and, you know, comes with the risk of this family releasing you, or you can stay in your grief and continue with the secondary gain of the financial benefits. And she said, I need to keep my grief then. I want the money. It was an empowered choice, right? But it was, for her, an understanding of, oh, this grief is serving me in a way that I was not necessarily aware of. And it's getting to the root of that truth so that you can have empowered choice.
And conscious choice.
Conscious choice.
Right? Like I'm keeping the grief because I want the money. And of course, that's easy to look at outside and judge. But if it's not to judge. It's her story. It's her story. Right.
And we have never walked a mile in her shoes, and we're not in the dichotomy of that family. And it's a third-hand story that you're hearing from somebody on a podcast. But
I get it.
It lands the plane of this and like gives you this runway of thought for, oh, isn't it interesting how each of us in our lives, whoever is listening to this, we make micro choices every day, and how many of those are loaded with thoughts, opinions, labels, belief systems that may not be true for us. And if we're willing to look a little bit deeper and maybe face the ugly, pukey thing that we're living with underneath there, it will set us free.
It's so confronting that I got so offended the first time I was told I had a choice about my behavior. It was like, no, I have a disease, I have a disorder, I have an addiction, and I'm a victim. So there's no choices here, because once you're faced with choices, then you're standing in your adult consciousness, and I did not want to.
And you're held accountable.
I wanted to be little person waiting for my prince to come. And I learned later what that was, and learning to parent our inner child is a thing you can do as an adult. You don't have to outsource that job. But oh my God, being faced with choice. Again, why cults are so comforting, because all your choices are taken away. You're told everything. Oh my gosh, choice is a very, very powerful tool, and it's incredibly overwhelming and scary if you've never had it or outsourced it forever. But I'm really glad I took back my choice power. Again, people get so pissed off at me. Are you saying addiction's a choice? Okay, as a clinician, I'm not saying it's all a choice. I am saying it's more complicated than the way we tend to frame it in our put it in a box, categorize it, and index it kind of society. It's not that simple.
Well, I love that you use the word outsource, because I use that all the time as well. And it's sort of, are we outsourcing or are we self-sourcing when it comes to not only what are our highest values and what choices are we going to make that align with those highest values and support them? Because at the end of the day, nobody is coming to save us. Nobody's invested in our best interest.
Which is a good thing.
And knows what we need more than we do.
Which is good, because it means it's in us to make the choices, to take the power back. Outsourcing your power feels really good, but so does cocaine. And eventually it's going to bite you in the ass. So
yeah, absolutely. And also the acknowledgement and the validation on the other side of the choices, even if it doesn't work out the way you want it to. I work with my clients so much on that. Like, okay, we've come up with a plan, we've come up with a strategy, we've gone from, I've heard you say, intention to action, right? We've traversed that. And let's also, on the other side of this, bookend it with, no matter what the response is, no matter what the outcome is, we are not going to shame or judge ourselves for it. We are going to celebrate that we advocated for ourselves. We are going to acknowledge and validate ourselves for taking aligned action with our highest values and what's in our best interest. That's it.
Oh, I love that. And if it doesn't work out, that's feedback. That's information.
That's all that it is.
Right.
Is information and feedback from which we get to grow.
And make new choices.
And from which we get to apply love.
Yes.
That's because I say to my clients all the time, the thing that we're actually most scared of is what we'll do to ourselves when we're alone with ourselves after everything is said and done. But what people don't attach to that is, we have a choice in that moment of, are we going to eviscerate ourselves and abuse ourselves and blame and shame ourselves and whip ourselves? Or are we going to come to ourselves with a, God, I'm so proud of you. God, I love you.
Yeah.
Wow, that was really hard. Way to go.
Yeah. It's not going to turn, and I think I hear a lot of people say, self-love will turn me soft. It's like, no. That's not a thing. People who are connected to themselves, who are not full of themselves in an ego arrogance way, but full of who I am as a human and as a whatever we are prior to and after we're humaning, those people don't suck. You're not going to end up being quote lazy. That's not a thing, but you won't be an unmotivated, passive, throw a hall pass up to not do anything.
You know, I'm so glad you said that, because I was actually at dinner with some friends last night, and one of them has a teenage son, and he was going to a party where there was going to be drinking, and they were having an open conversation about it. And the mom was saying to her teenage son, you know, I am not going to always be there to make these decisions for you. And so, you know, I want to empower you to make the right decisions. You know, am I going to sit here and say you're underage and I condone you drinking? No, I'm not going to do that. But I also have instilled in you what I've instilled in you. I trust you. I know that you know how to make these decisions. She's like, but what I want to encourage you to remember is this. She's like, when I was your age, the guys that I was attracted to, the girls that I wanted to be friends with, were the ones who didn't follow the crowd because they were confident enough to make their own decisions. And by the way, that is self-love, and that is badass.
Oh, that's so good.
Being the leader and not the follower, and saying, yeah, no, I don't need to drink to have a good time. I don't need to drink to feel comfortable or confident or feel like I can go up and talk to that girl or whatever. Like, I'm good. You know, that guy is the badass. It's not the guy who gets so sloppy drunk because he feels like he needs to fit in and is like puking in the corner. That's not the guy the girl's going home with.
That parent is badass.
That's not the guy.
I want that parent too. I want that guy and I want that parent.
Right. And so I think, you know, when people say like, oh, you know, self-love is soft, I say self-love is hard. Mm-hmm. It's not always the easy choice.
Right.
And I also say it's hard, like, that's hard. Like, you dope, man. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, you're a solid dude. Like, you're the badass in the room for not going with the crowd. And by the way, that leadership then gives permission to somebody else who doesn't want to drink to go, oh, well, if they're not drinking, then I'm not drinking either.
Oh, I love that. I love that you use the term leadership, because self-leadership is the highest state available to us. Again, assuming that you have your needs met and you have choices and you're not in an oppressive situation. When you can self-lead, then again, it's all about being conscious. So even if things aren't working out, it doesn't feel like you're constantly a victim to the forces outside your control. Because I lived that.
1,000%.
That sucks.
I don't know if so one of the coaching programs that I went through, which was pretty rigorous, was IPEC. And they have something called the ELI, which is the Energy Leadership Index Assessment. And it is all about how you lead, but starts with self-leadership and then expands outward, right? And it's how do you show up not just under stress, but also when you're thriving, sort of like the executive center being online, or if you're coming in from the amygdala and the fear-based responses. But I mean, it really is such a huge indicator. Every time I give someone that assessment and we get the feedback, it's always so mind-blowing because we really are always in every moment self-leading. We're a salesperson to ourselves.
All
and
day.
What are we buying and what are we selling?
Oh, so good.
We are given these micro choices and what are we doing with them? Oh my gosh, I could keep talking forever and ever. Okay, we have to do like multiple episodes with you. Okay, so we've gotten to this place where now we're like licensed and we are, you know, we're always on a journey of healing ourselves, but now you're helping to heal others. You've written books, you're like an adjunct professor, you're doing all of these remarkable things, right? Like turning your mess into your message by God. And now what? Like let's turn and face the future. Let's look on the timeline, you know, of what is coming on the horizon. And what is next? What is the future of, you know, Britt Frank's bringing her light into the world?
It's so much fun. It all feels so adult too, some of this stuff. It's like, oh my God, I still feel like I'm totally faking being an adult human half the time. So it's hysterical to my many multiple personalities.
Oh, trust me. I look at my children and I'm like, wait, I'm your age. How am I parenting you? How am I responsible for you?
It's very strange.
Get out of the way. I want to get on the ride first.
Exactly.
Right.
So I haven't totally, well, that's not totally true. That's a lie. Don't lie. Okay. So I try to stay in what I'm doing now, because what I'm doing now is this really beautiful combination of things I've always wanted that I do believe are going to unlock future freedom and flexibility and choices. That is to me the ideal. That is the biggest flex, is to have the ability to make choices and to be conscious and to to do it. So that's my goal.
And then to do it, empowering other people to do it, like win-win, bonus on bonus.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I really love that. And what an honor to all the yous that you've been in the past.
Oh, they're still sort of confused. And so we time travel frequently. Like, I haven't been in LA in a while. And last time I was here, it wasn't the best circumstances. And so my brain was like, oh my gosh, is it this year where this is happening? And I felt that flood. If I didn't know that's what it was, I would have thought I was having a flashback.
Yes.
And it's like, oh wait. And then I sort of had to I have a lot of inner conversations with all the different parts, all the different me's. I'm like, hey girls, it's okay.
Same.
This is how old we are now.
Yes.
They still don't get that.
Yes, I totally get it.
It's a lot of fun.
I totally get that. I mean, I mean, my little girl and my inner teenager fight all the time.
I bet.
All the time. You know, my inner teenager is like, you're embarrassing us. My little girl's like, I don't care. You know, I mean, it's quite something.
Yes.
And then my like inner awkward tween is like, no, we will. I mean, I should write a book about all my parts. Anyway, the only person that would care would be me. Anyway, okay. I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests when we wrap this up.
All right.
And that is, if I had a mirror here and you were to hold the mirror up to yourself, because this is Look at Me Now, and this is about the reflection of the journey that you have just shared with us. It is all the yous that you've been, all of the moments that you've traversed, right? It's like if you were to chart your life and you saw those spikes going up and down, right? And you were taking an inventory of those, right? An autopsy without shame. You're looking in the mirror and with nobody else's opinion that matters, acknowledging and validating yourself for this lifetime of tapping that inner resilience and strength. Taking this moment to acknowledge and to validate yourself and looking in the mirror, what do you have to say to yourself in this moment after reflecting on all of this?
I actually do that as a practical, like regular exercise.
I love it.
Because it's so powerful.
It is.
And so I actually wrote on my mirror this morning because my parts were like, you're going where to do what and talk to who, what the hell is happening. And it was, look what we did. Look what we did with what we had to do it with. That's pretty cool. And I wrote a little heart on it too.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
Yes. The littles were very, very pleased.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at us now. Look at us now.
Indeed.
Where can we find you? How can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Britt Frank. The first book is The Science of Stuck. The workbook is the Getting Unstuck workbook. And then the third book is a parts workbook. So yes. And it's called Align Your Minds.
Go. Okay, I talked over it. What is it?
Align Your Minds.
Align Your Minds.
And it'll be out next summer.
I mean,
So
let's fucking go.
Yeah, let's book it.
I'm really here for it. I'm really here for it. I am in line to pre-order. Let's go. Let's go. Can't wait to share that when it comes out with everybody. Well, I mean, I'm sad. I'm sad to say goodbye. Is this really over? Rats, man. Ugh, it's another episode of Look at Me Now. We love ya. Peace.
Join us for Look at Me Now, wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to share, like, and subscribe.